Wendy Forrest here from the Hackney Society. I'm very glad to be here in Abney Park with Alan Denney, who's been gaining a lot of attention and interest locally for his photos of the 1970s and 1980s, which people are really enjoying. Your photos have now got a big and an enthusiastic audience because people love the fact that they capture the spirit of Hackney 40 odd years ago when we were young, and that they give you that kind of detail of difference so we can see exactly how things have changed. But when you took those photos, you weren't going for a public record, were you? This was something for you.
Yeah, no, it was, I was keeping a visual diary, if you like, but I wanted to make a record of life around me as it unfolded. I wanted to take photographs of the physical environment, people, places, events. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Well, we're really glad that you took those photos for you, and we're also really grateful that today you've decided to do something a bit special for the Hackney Society. So you're taking us on a trip south along the A10.
That's right.
And you've gone back to 20 odd locations along that route, and you've re-photographed them so that we can do a real compare and contrast, which is great, very useful for people that weren't here, but also pretty useful for people like me who was here and have completely forgotten.
Yeah, photographs, you know, you can get so much history out of a photograph. It's that's why I took them. I wanted to record what was going on, really.
So Alan, we're starting with the Winter of Discontent, 79?
That's right. This photo was taken in February 1979 during the bin men strike. There weren't any women refuse collectors in Hackney at the time. Hackney was a dump, really, and the bin men strike just made it worse. There were huge piles of uncollected rubbish that gathered over a period of a couple of months. Luckily it was in the winter, so it wasn't too smelly, but this pile that was outside Sam Stoller's, the fresh fishmonger on Stamford Hill, really did stink. It was something that you really wanted to avoid.
But this is such a loved facade, so you remember the smell, but the look is really, you know, lots of people love that.
Yes.
And when we look at it in 79, it was particularly beautiful.
Yeah, no, it looks good, doesn't it? It's, there's an old car, there's the fishmonger's still working.
The fishmongers.
Sam Stoller, that colour photo was a year before. Then there's it was a fruit and veg store, I think. And then there was a stationer's, I think, next door. That's all gone, as you can see as we come onto the next picture. And
there was a big fire, wasn't there? About nearly 20 years ago, but they put it back the same.
That's right, yeah,
but
they restored it.
But if we look at this facade in the next door now,
it's
a pity, isn't it?
It is. It's gone orange. It's a kosher butcher's. They've lost the egg store bit of signage that they had at the top, and they've gone their own way.
Probably somewhere that should be locally listed, and isn't yet, because we can see how that might all disappear quite quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we move along to the bus stop?
Yeah. That's from the other side of the road. Taken from the other side of the road, we're looking south, and beyond the bus, people waiting for the bus. There's a lady with a beehive hairstyle in there, but beyond the bus you can see what used to be called Stevens of Stoke Newington. It was, most towns had their own department stores up until the 60s and 70s, and this was Stoke Newington's department store. You can see the bit on Cazenove Road. There's an empty wreck of a building there that hasn't got a roof on. Not an uncommon sight in Hackney in those days, I'm afraid. Buildings were just left to rot like that.
And Stevens looks like it was a fairly lovely building compared to what's there now.
Yeah. No, it's I guess it was built in the 20s or 30s. It looked like a functional utilitarian department store. Whereas what we've got now, moving on to the next picture, it just reminds me of the police station down the road, really. It's a bit of postmodernism that just sort of landed in the high street. So
that we can kind of regret. But this is a particularly 2020 photo, isn't it? Nobody's there.
No, that's right. This is during the morning, looking into the sun there, and I think it was during lockdown, so it was a quiet time.
Okay, so back to the 1970s and just outside where we are now.
Yeah, just outside, there was this thing called the Stoke Newington Town Guide. Again, these were a common feature of a lot of town centres. There would have been a cabinet underneath the sign with a glass front, and behind that would have been a map of the local area. And to delight local children, there was a row of buttons on the bottom. You could press those to light up where Marks and Spencer's was, or the library, or Stevens if you couldn't be bothered to turn around and have a look yourself. But it deteriorated over the years, and it was just a wreck then. Behind it, you can see the pylon of of Abney Park, one of the pylons. It was in quite a state of disrepair. You can see that the windows have been broken and it looks really grubby. But then a year later, in the next photo, you can see that it's been spruced up. It still hasn't been glazed, but the stonework's been cleaned. The town sign is still there, and there's a comfy chair you can sit on while you're watching the traffic go by. And next door to that is the underground toilets, gents and ladies, that stayed there until the 90s, when it got filled in with cement, I believe.
But neither photo really speaks to civic pride, does it? There's a sense of, this is what we used to around here.
Well, that's right. I suppose, you can see, the fact that the cemetery was being cleaned up, or the frontage was being cleaned up at the time, reflects, people were seeing value in making the environment look nice.
And that was the trust, really, so that was volunteers.
Yeah.
And tell us about that, because there's something about the cementing of the toilets is to do with the Hackney Brook?
Well, I believe so. I think the Hackney Brook runs under there somewhere. It comes up above to street levels occasionally. There was a flood, wasn't there, a couple of years ago. But presumably sophisticated, intelligent water engineers have made sure that it's all safe.
So these are toilets that you can't turn into a club or a hairdresser's?
No.
Because they have got water running through them.
I suppose you could chip away all the earth and have a sort of Rachel Whiteread type sculpture representing the toilet. Yeah.
Moving on then to one of our most famous buildings, 187.
Okay, yes, yeah. 187 Stoke Newington High Street. There it is, that's in 1979 as well. It's in the winter. You wouldn't have been able to see the front once those trees were in leaf. But it was a beautiful facade. It was built in 1712, I believe. And John Wilmer, the Quaker salt merchant, lived there, and he died there in the 1770s, I think. There's a story that he was buried, he was buried in his back garden, but that he was also buried in his bed with a bedside table and a chair next to him, and also a cord attached to his wrist that went to his coachman's house. There was a bell on the end of it, so that if he wasn't really dead, he could let the coachman know and hope that he'd come and take him out.
And I think that for over a century it was the invalid asylum for respectable women?
Yeah, something like that. It had sort of institutional role. I think it was also a school possibly there,
I think it was a convalescent home for female servants. Okay. Not much medicine, not many doctors, but quite a lot of hymn singing. Okay. But probably, better than what some of the alternatives might have been.
Better than the workhouse.
Yep, definitely that.
The next one, we move into the 20th century, and you can see it's been the building's been Disneyfied, if you like. It's turned into a Thai restaurant. It's called Yum Yums, as you can see on the sign now. Yeah, well, it's you wonder what John Wilmer would say.
And what's not obvious at first sight is that it's just the facade, yes? Yeah,
that's right. In the 90s, they secured the facade and knocked down everything behind it.
And you've got a shot round the back that makes that obvious?
That's right, yeah. You can see that was in 1980, I think. That's the rear elevation. You can see what a patchwork of repairs, additions, all sorts of things are going on there. I think a building detective would enjoy studying that, but it'd be even better if we could see it in real life, but it's gone.
Absolutely, and so this is it today.
Yeah. It's just a sort of bland,
But it's evident that the whole building really has disappeared except for that frontage.
That's right. And I think there had been a magnificent oak staircase in the original building, all sorts of fittings, mantelpieces, all that. I think they were all stripped out and looted in the 60s.
So let's find some people. Looking across the street, Alan,
Okay.
who did you
So
get
this
here?
is going down the high street. This is, it's just some Jewish guy walking up the high street with a little suitcase. And you can see on things that aren't there anymore. There's the Midland Bank, which is a post office now. There's Curtis's Shoes, that isn't a shoe shop anymore. And then there's Woolworths at the end, yeah.
So do you think he's necessarily Jewish or is he just hip? That's a kind of pork pie hat there, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I think he's heading for Stamford Hill.
Right, but we remember Willie's well, don't we? All gone, and we've got an equivalent young man of today.
Well, yeah, that's taken from more or less the same position, really. But this guy's got the modern accoutrements of a mobile phone and a Costa coffee, strolling up the high street. So times change, but young men still stroll up the high street and get on with
that
that.
kind of purposeful way.
Yeah.
And looking again across the road, we've got a derelict shop there.
Yeah, I think this was the Co-op on the corner of Brook Road and the High Street, just opposite where the post office used to be. I think it may have been a butcher's or a grocer. No, not a grocer. The people that sell baker. It was a baker, I think. You can see a poster there for Albert Chambers. He was an evangelist. He's still going. He's got a church or a chapel on Glyn Road. It's a single-story affair with an asbestos roof. He doesn't use the big tent anymore.
And posters for the Rainbow, which is now Evangelical Church.
That's right.
But was a big venue with James Brown and Zappa and
all
Marley.
Sorts of, up in Finsbury Park.
Big night out for us.
Yes, yeah. And Third World, they were a sort of world music band. I used to have an LP of theirs, but somebody borrowed it and didn't bring it back.
Well, let's hope that they are watching and remember.
Yeah.
So today, back to a baker's.
Yeah, that's right, and a little stall mending mobile phones or doing other things with them.
Turkish bakers and mobile phones.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting shop.
Yeah, this is on the high street. It's on the east side somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was. And it's selling all this stuff. There's an Italian table there that they're advertising for £89.50. This was taken in, I think, 1978, 79. Average wage for a woman then take home, gross was about £64. So an £84 table would have 2 or 3 weeks to save for one of those. Or you could buy an agate telephone, or there are other bits and pieces in there. It's there were quite a few shops like that in Stoke Newington.
Well, I was living just round the corner at that time, and I have no memory of that shop at all.
Okay.
I guess I wasn't in the market.
No.
But today, actually, it's...
This recent photo it continues the Italian theme. It's a shop called Italian Home Furniture. It's actually on Kingsland High Street. Now look, I'm half Italian, and I can tell you that this sort of stuff, you might see it presented as sort of ironic kitsch in a gallery in Milan, but you wouldn't see it in an Italian person's home. So, but somebody's buying it.
Somebody's buying it for 40 years. Somebody's buying it.
I know.
Okay.
Well, horses for courses, isn't it?
Yep, a mystery.
Yeah.
So, Alan, we're sort of halfway along, and we've seen piles of rubbish.
Yep.
We've seen heritage buildings gone to ruin, and we've seen dodgy furniture. But now we're coming to what was probably the horror of 1980s along this strip, which was the police station.
That's right, yeah, this is Stoughtons police station. It's sort of 1880s London yellow stocks, rather grim, grey exterior. It was common knowledge that the police from that station controlled the drug trade down in Dalston. They were known for their violent racism. It was a scary place. It had a scary reputation.
It was brought up in Parliament, wasn't it, by I think Brian Sedgemoor, who was Hackney South MP then.
Yeah.
And there was a big an inquiry.
Well, there was there were several internal inquiries that took years and years to. I think 30 or 40 police officers were moved. The custody sergeant shot himself in a cell in Chingford police station. It was sort of swept under the carpet, really. I don't think anyone was prosecuted.
But at one point, I think there was thought of criminal charges against at least 10 of these police.
Yeah. They were recycling stolen property. They were stealing stuff from crime scenes and the drug trade.
And all of that probably would have stayed hidden if it wasn't for the Hackney Community Defence Association.
Yeah, I think the Hackney Defence Association came on in the 80s. The next photograph is from 1979. I think and it marks the death of a young black boy called Michael Ferreira, who he'd been stabbed by some white boys in a fight out on the street, and his friends took him into the station. And he bled to death there, basically. They were rather slow in calling an ambulance.
Not the first or the last?
No. There'd been a woman from Finsbury Park, Asita Sims, that died there in very murky circumstances earlier on. And there were others too.
And not long after all of this, the police station came down and was rebuilt. I don't think it was explicitly tied into that, but you kind of feel that the timing was convenient for...
Yeah, hopefully, I guess they wanted, a clean slate, as it were, and they demolished that whole facade of buildings, whole stretch of buildings, and replaced it with this rather unusual looking building. Great cavernous, dark spaces opening up in the front. Not very welcoming or friendly sort of building. And it's still the Metropolitan Police, still institutionally racist, and the police officers don't reflect the community that they serve. They're all young white men.
Still demonstrations outside, but luckily not about local deaths.
No, but this involved Hackney resident. It involves a Stoughtons police officer. It's the death of Rashan Charles in 2017, down by the waste, further down the road.
Okay, so a continuing story. Shall we go on to the old people?
Yeah.
And we're not such a continuing story. We're a shrinking part of the population, aren't we?
We are indeed.
A growing population of which we are a smaller and smaller part.
Yeah, that's right. And these people are, they were when I was in my 20s and 30s, these are people that were the older generation, white working class. They'd gone through the Depression, the war, post-war austerity, and then Hackney fell apart in front of them. The big factories moved out, the little factories closed, there was no work, their children left London because there wasn't any work, their neighbours left, their friends left, and they were left isolated and unhappy. There was a lot of unhappiness and sadness in that community, and the National Front got quite a lot of support in the south of the borough from these people.
A bit of continuity here. We've got our fashion retailers.
Yeah.
Perhaps not quite as we would recognise it today.
No, but serving local needs nonetheless. It's Hackney had lots and lots of junk shops. They tended to last for a year or two and then close down, then they'd reopen. And here you can see the contents of somebody's flat that's probably died recently. It's been cleared, it's been put on the pavement. You can pick up a nice gas fire, a fridge, there's a radiogram there. Yeah, I know. And they took payments from the DHSS, which was the Welfare Benefits Agency at the time. So, you know, if you're unemployed, you could furnish your new flat or your new squat by visiting one of these places.
And I bet that radiogram would actually shift quite quickly today.
Yeah.
But now it's a Turkish hairdresser's.
I think so, yeah, it's called Perceptions. It's, it's a hairdresser. The shop next door is still a plumbing supplies shop though.
And thinking about the Turkish community, you're going to take us on to a demonstration.
That's right. Yeah, we're on the other side of the high street now. We're on Stoke Newington Road now, aren't we? This was in 1984, I think, late 84. This was just after the deportation of the Hasbudak family. They were mum, dad and 2 young kids, lived in Stoke Newington. The children, 6 and 8, they were born in Britain. They went to William Patton Infants. Their parents were selected for deportation, and there was a campaign mounted by the school, the head teacher, NUT, parents, demonstrations, petitions, all to no good. They were deported, and this was a demonstration, I think, the month after they were sent back to Turkey. It's Turkish workers protesting about deportations. You can see there's the quality used clothing store. Again, these were a feature of high streets. You could buy, a suit for £8 there, all sorts of men's clothes. These sorts of shops have disappeared now. Charity shops have done for them.
Well, it's rebranded as vintage.
Yeah.
And this is the same streetscape today, looking appropriately bereft, really.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Baptist church.
That's the Baptist church. That's just up, just down the road a bit further. Glory to God in Hackney, it says. To the right, you can see what used to be a church hall, the Baptist church hall. It's quite large, but it got demolished, and they built a block of flats there, which you can see in the next photo.
And this church, I think it's listed now, but it's just shrunk and shrunk over time, hasn't it?
That's right.
It keeps losing bits of itself.
That's right, yeah. But it's got a very active congregation, I believe, and
right.
It's well used. So.
And here's another, what's now a faith location.
That's right. This is what used to be the Astra Cinema. It closed in, I think, 1983. I think that's when this photo was taken.
Just before, yeah.
Yeah. This is a Sunday morning photo. You can see a man asleep on the steps there. It was quite unusual to see street sleepers in the 80s and 70s.
Yeah.
This guy probably just got too drunk to go home. And just next to him, you may not be able to see it, there's a poster for one of Frank Bruno's first fights. But the Turkish community saw an opportunity here. They purchased the building and set about turning it into the Aziziye Mosque. They fundraised locally, and I think they had substantial contributions from wealthy people in the Muslim community, and they turned it into a spectacular turquoise mosque, which you can see at the end there.
So rescued from kung fu films and soft porn.
That's right, yes.
To one of the most celebrated mosques in the country.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a beauty.
Yeah, it is.
And what you can't see is that they built another dome over the central auditorium. You can't see it from the street. You have to go around the back or be on the bus.
And talking of beauties, here's one that's been kept, really.
Yes, yeah. This building has survived. It's a 1980 photo, I think, the first one. It's a picture of, it was then called North London Magistrates Court, and there was also, it incorporated the local family court, and it was a very nice facade. and we've still got it. It's turned into apartments now, and they cleaned it up. What has changed, the one thing that has changed on the old photo, you can see on the parapet it's called the police court, but presumably people wouldn't want to buy a flat with police court written over it, so that's been scrubbed out. I think the coat of arms is still there. Yeah, no, it's a fine looking building.
It is. It's one of those things that gives you faith in listing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So now going back to a street scene in the 80s,
Yeah.
when youth unemployment around here was very, very high.
Yeah, absolutely. There were no jobs, you know. There was nothing to do really. I think this is Arcola Street coming on to Stoke Newington Road, and it's a demonstration by some young people. They were people from the Labour Party Young Socialists, who was controlled by militants at the time, and they were protesting about unemployment. The figure on the coffin, they're carrying a coffin, Margaret Thatcher's coffin there. It had 2 million, at that point there were 2 million unemployed. Locally that translated as about 1 in 5 people, adults, didn't have jobs in Hackney. Yeah, tough times.
Yes, so here's the same bit of streetscape today.
Yeah,
looking 2020 desolate.
Absolutely, but a sign of the times, the meat fest that you could have at the Crazy Horse Kebab restaurant, you can't do that anymore. It's a vegan something or other now. That's the new restaurant on the corner there.
And then getting into Dalston proper, this is looking a bit like a hopper in your...
Yeah, it is, isn't it? But it's actually looking up Sandringham Road, isn't it? It's looking at the high street.
It's a corner that's changed a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. As you can see, there was a garage there. That was replaced by those people that gave out videos.
Blockbuster.
Blockbusters, and then it turned into something else, I think. I can't remember. But it's gone now, and we've got a 120-bed hotel that suddenly sprouted up and overtops all the buildings there. It's a bit out of scale and out of proportion, really.
And the timing's not great either, is it, for them? But we're not going to be too bothered about that. Right, we're coming into the busiest bit of Dalston, and I think you and I, when we've talked about this before, we both think that there's a Dalston feel that's kind of about bustle and purpose and getting the shop done, which just lives on.
That's right, yeah. And I think the heart of that is Ridley Road Market.
Yeah.
It attracts people from all over North and East London, as well as local people. So of a Saturday, it's it's quite a place to be in, and there's a spillover onto the streets. It's a great place, great meeting place. Families meet. It's a proper town centre, really.
So this bus stop just opposite Winchester Place, you've got the black and white from the old days and the colour from now, but actually they're not that different, are they?
No, it's more or less the same. People they weren't wearing masks in those days. You can also see in the older photo there's a poster that says foot pump. This was a Saatchi and Saatchi poster for the Conservative Party. This was the leader of the Labour Party at the time was Michael Foot, and they're suggesting that if Foot got elected, then inflation. It's a Tory joke. It worked. She came in with a 140 odd majority.
Well, I'm glad you explained the joke there. Sometimes Tory jokes need explaining. Then we're going on to Kingston Passage, and again some continuity, because that Boots is still there, looking very much like it did 40 years ago. Yeah. This is that's Winchester Place there. It's looking up the Great Canyon of the High Street, unobstructed by tall hotel buildings. I remember the first time I drove up from the city up the High Street. It was like going along a sort of a brick canyon. These Victorian buildings,
looming out. It's quite impressive. I loved it.
Good.
And I came back.
We love it still. This was the Dalston town guide, so
Yeah.
that matches to the one that we saw outside Abney.
That's right, and this one was still intact. The buttons, it's in shadow, you can't see it properly, but it's a map of Dalston, and all the shops are marked out on there, and children could press the buttons and the lights would come on. The map, the whole thing is actually has been preserved in Hackney Museum. It's been cleaned up and the lights work now. But the map is still upside down. Rather strangely, the north is at the bottom of the map and south is at the top. But there we go.
And the shot across the road is looking still quite recognisable, isn't it?
Yeah, mostly. The pub on the corner is still there. But beyond that, in the old photo, you can see it used to be called the Dalston Theatre. Huge, great building, turned into West Indian club in the late 60s, the Four Aces, and sadly that was all demolished despite a very active campaign to try and keep the building and the Georgian shops that run along Dalston Lane. But
Plenty for regret there.
yeah, they've gone now, so they've built these tower blocks.
And then you're just going to take us briefly over Bullthorn Road, and we've got
Heading south.
some of Kingsland Road. I think it's a fairly grand bit originally of Kingsland Road, Kingsland Crescent. Not looking great in your photo.
No, it's looking, people working in there. It's, a fine Victorian terrace, crescent rather. And, it was full of small workshops, factories, mostly rag trade, but also making shoes, all sorts of other things going on in there. Signage all over the front. It was a sort of a busy place. But as we deindustrialised and all the work left Britain, the factories went, and it was tarted up, and it's now accommodation again. It's turned into residential flats.
And that's quite a common cycle, isn't it? So this was something that was, fairly grand residences built in the 1790s, all workshops and sweatshops when you took it first, and now back again to flats and I think media studios, that sort of thing.
I think so. And there's a Russian club in the basement.
But the Russian club is a media studio.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I haven't been down there.
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And finally, our final stop, and a beautiful one.
Yeah. Rusinurbe, you could say. This is the City Garden mural on Kingsland Road. It's just down. It's on the west side of the road. It's on just down from the museum, I think. And it was a mural that was painted and made by Freeform Arts Trust, working together with children from Randall Kramer School and Shoreditch School. The mural was finished in 1981, and it's a lovely scene. Market gardens, allotments, people gardening. It really brightened up that bit of Kingsland Road.
I think it's beautiful, and it's hard to believe that it was ever like that, but you go back to the C.A. Matthews paintings of the 1850s, and it was. Probably not quite so lovely as that, but certainly Market Garden and Brickfield.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's gone.
It deteriorated over the years, and I don't know, within the last 10 years I think it was completely scrubbed off, and it's just a memory now.
Well, Alan, that was great. So thank you very, very much for that walk. And I think it makes sense that we started in Abney, which over decades of volunteer work has improved hugely to the point that the Lottery Fund is giving us millions to make it even better. So that just shows what can happen. Yeah. But this reminds us that things can also slip away.
That's right, we have to be vigilant. There's a lot of valuable stuff out there. We need to look after it.
We do. So people should buy your book, and they should join the Hackney Society.
That's right. Yeah.
There was a time when all the green and little houses with their beautiful doors brought me joy.
Many thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We talked about a book during the film, and this is it. We'll tell you more about how you can get that later, but for people who are desperate to get their hands on this book or need to know anything about the other things that we've referred to, there's a link at the bottom of your video. Press the show more and you can find everything there. But now this is your chance to ask questions to Alan. We've had a few, and we had some earlier, and I think we're going to kick off with something that came in on Monday. And because of the timing, I'm thinking that maybe that was triggered by the Small Axe film that had been on the night before. But the question is about the Hackney events around the time of the Brixton uprising, Alan. So, what do you remember about that? We're asked. And did you take any photos?
Well, yeah, I do remember it. It was in July 1981, Handsworth or Toxteth or in Brixton. But, you know, it was a local expression of anger, I suppose. You know, the problems facing the black community then are more or less the same as they face now. You know, young men were kept being stopped and searched, treated aggressively, assaulted occasionally. There was a history in Stoughtons of people who died in Stoughtons station. Unemployment, so a heady mix, and it all kicked off in that July. Yeah. I took one photo. I was living in Culverston Crescent at the time, and there was a policeman outside the front of the standing there, making sure that nobody was rioting. And I remember also, I think the evening before, there'd been a pounding on the front door, and somebody was running away from the police and was looking for shelter, and we let them in, and the police passed by, thank goodness. And a friend of mine, Dennis, got arrested for throwing a brick and shouting, "I want to be free." So, those are my memories of those evenings in 1981. Though those problems are still there, though, you know, with the black community, we're still seeing, you know, we've got Black Lives Matter to remind us of, you know, those problems.
Absolutely. I remember I was living on one of the streets that runs up to the A10, and everybody gathered at the top of the street to watch the activity, and it was all quite neighbourly. But you know, these days everybody would have their phone out, and I don't think anybody had a camera. That just wasn't something that you thought about at that time.
I think Neil Martinson, photographer that was based at Centreprice, he took some photos, but he said it was really, really scary, and he put the camera away quite quickly.
Right. Okay. Well, that takes us on actually to the second question that came in, and that was about a new mood of photography in the 80s, and were there new ideas about, you know, what photography could do and who should be doing it, and did you feel yourselves to be a part of something like that?
Yeah, there was a proper photographic ferment in the 70s and 80s. You know, it was part of the 68 generation wanting to make a better world, and some of them thought that they could use photography to help them achieve that. So you had you know, there was a growth of community photography projects across London, and in Centreprice we had Centreprice Young Photographers, Hackney Unemployed Media Scheme, the Rio Tape Group, Hackney Flashers. You know, there was a lot of thought, and just down the road in Bethnal Green was the Half Moon Photography Workshop that produced Camera Work, a very influential magazine about documentary photography. Yeah, you know, cameras were expensive. Taking photographs was expensive. You had to buy a film. You had to you know, send it away, take it away to have it developed and printed. You know, you'd be talking about £5, £6, £7 maybe. So people didn't take many photographs. A lot of people just had photographs of them, saw themselves in photos of, you know, holiday snaps, school photos, passport photos. But you couldn't really see representations of working class people or working class life in mainstream media. You know, there were the usual unhelpful stereotypes, you know, the cheerful but stupid Cockney, criminals, mugshots, strikers, football hooligans, glue sniffers, you know, all that sort of stuff. So these community projects gave made taking photos accessible to young kids living on council estates, and helped them to photograph themselves, their lives. And they used these photos for exhibitions. Some of the stuff went into pamphlets that were campaigning for, I don't know, better housing or against racism. They made posters, postcards. You know, there was a very lively scene going on. And I suppose I was on the outside of this. I had a day job. I took photographs occasionally, but I didn't have the resources to take huge amounts of photos. So, but we swam in the same sea, I suppose, and I took similar sorts of photos. Team took thousands of photos of Hackney in those days.
And it was kind of that social documents, wasn't it? Wasn't that the time of the Hackney Flashers did a big exhibition about women at work in Hackney? And then
That's right, yeah.
Care. So, and that was all kind of hidden from history stuff, wasn't it? Or in fact, it wasn't even history. It was.
Well, yeah, nobody knew about it. You know, it was groundbreaking. It was revolutionary, really. You know, to see sympathetic portrayals of working class people was, you know, very different, very unusual, and you know, I think you know, it helped empower these young people. It made, you know, gave them the sense that they could make their voices heard, and that they weren't just, you know, sort of unemployed. You know, you know, they were important groups, and the legacy they've left us. You know, this the Rio tape slide group. They took 12,000 photos. They've made a you know, it's an encyclopedic visual, you know, survey of Hackney at that time. I don't know of any other archive anywhere like that. It's quite unique. It's you know, we're lucky to have it, and it was made by troublemakers.
But if you go around recording things as they happen, then sometimes somebody might object. So that's one of the questions we've been asked. Did anybody ever turn around to you and say, you know, what do you think you're doing?
No, never, strangely. It was always my fear that somebody would say, "Oh, what are you doing?" But nobody ever did. I suppose I was lucky. I know people, other photographers who, you know, had more difficult experiences. But, you know, I got away with it. Well, it did happen once. We were on holiday in Cuba, and I took a photo in a bar, and the man opposite wagged his finger at me. I didn't feel very good about that, but what he didn't know and what I didn't know is that the film hadn't wound on properly in the camera, so I didn't get his photo anyway. So.
Okay, so what else have we got? Something about architecture, and do you think that good architecture, can change behaviours? I think this is in reference to the kind of decay that was around on the streets. I suppose they're getting into a bit of kind of Giuliani broken window territory.
I think bad architecture that's badly maintained, you know, can make people feel bad. You know, it's you know, if you walk around streets that are full of you know, tinned up houses with broken roofs, if there are, front gardens full of rubbish, that's not going to make you feel very positive about how you feel about yourself or where you live. And for people looking from the outside, it just looks awful. I remember, I used to come up to London from the Medway towns where my mother lived. I used to hitchhike. I remember a lorry driver saying, "Where are you going, mate?" And I said, "I'm going to Stoke Newington." And he said, "What do you want to go there for? It's a shithole." Hackney had a very, very bad reputation, and it just looked awful. And I think that didn't cheer people up. I think it just added to the sense of being ground down that a lot of people had.
So things like the mural were particularly important. And somebody's asked, can you tell us a bit more about the people that made that and about what else they made?
Yeah, Freeform. They were a group of artists that settled in Dalston Lane. They had a shop front there. That was in the early 70s. They were artists. They were funded by the Arts Council, and they worked closely with Hackney Council, local communities, local schools, and they negotiated things like murals. Well, we saw one there. They ran festivals. They ran the Hackney Marsh Festival that ran for several years in the late 70s. They constructed the Hackney Grove Garden that used to, next to the town hall, Hackney Town Hall, I think a building was demolished and an open space was left for a few years, and Freeform turned it into a weird and wonderful garden. They also, I remember going to a May Day event in Victoria Park. They did an amazing pyrotechnic fire event. It was, and they worked. They did stuff out of London. They did festivals in Manchester, Newcastle, and Liverpool, I think. So they were very busy people. In the mid 80s, and they were run as a collective. And like a lot of collectives at the time, problems started arising. There was a split, effectively. There was some of them wanted to continue being a collective, whereas others wanted a more managerial sort of approach to things. A similar thing happened at Time Out magazine, and again down at the Half Moon Photography Workshop. Seems like left-wing people are always arguing amongst themselves, and they're still going. I think they've got an office on Richmond Road, but I don't think they've got any particular involvement with Hackney at the moment.
Right. Well, that's good to know that there's still something going on. Alan, I think this is a good one to maybe wrap up on, because Sam Roberts has said, well, given what you just described about how rare it was to take photos and how kind of ubiquitous photographic activity is now, what do you think is going to remain of all of the millions of photos that are now being taken? And maybe I can wrap up into that. Do you think there could be something like the Tape Slide project today?
Yeah, I suppose with digital cameras and camera phones, everybody is a citizen photojournalist potentially. But there's an awful lot of stuff out there, and sometimes it's just difficult to find your way through it. I think part of the problem for the photographer is that images get put up on the internet, but the photographer then loses control of them. There's no way of captioning them, putting them in context. It's I think for photographs to mean something, or to bring out the meaning of photographs, I think you do need words and you do need contextualization. And I think we're just at the moment, it just seems like we're getting a huge rush of images, and they're just sort of washing over us. Some of it'll stick, but I think I'd rather have a situation where everyone can take a photograph rather than just people who can afford an expensive camera and getting your films developed. I think that's progress.
Okay, let me just ask you one extra thing. We've been asked, do you have any other photo archives that you could recommend? Photo archives of Hackney.
Well, there's the R.A. Gibson archive. R.A. Gibson was a high street photographer. He worked from 1952 to about 83, and he was on Lower Clapton Road, just opposite the Round Chapel. And he left an archive of 150,000 negatives from the 50s to the 80s. Most of it's studio stuff, but there's also lots of events, so it sort of starts off, and it reflects the changes in Hackney. The first photos are white working class, secular Jews. There's bar mitzvahs, there's Jewish weddings, and then gradually in the 60s you start seeing black faces. You see people, nurses in uniform with their diploma. The archive is at Hackney Archives. They got it there. Yeah. I worked on that for a while, helping them unpack it. Fascinating stuff to see all this stuff that hadn't been seen for 60 years. Yeah.
And there's a lot now at Hackney Archives that's much more accessible because there's a whole new way of getting at it. So that's something that people will probably want to have a look at. Yeah. Okay, well, this seems like a good moment to move to the messages from our sponsor. And maybe just to start with your book, Alan. So this one, how can people get hold of it? There are all the details. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely something that's highly recommended. Mm-hmm. So, Alan, thank you so much for coming along tonight and for working with us on this. It's just been a joy, and I've certainly learnt a huge amount from you. So, thank you.
My pleasure.
Talk about our next event, and that's going to be with Laurie Elks, and Laurie can go back at least as far as you and I can, and he's going to take us on a tour of the Lee Valley Regional Park, travelling as you do through space and time. And Laurie helped to set up the Lee Valley Association in 1978. And he's going to take us through highlights of, again, decades. But you can see some of Laurie's very attractive photos that he'll be showing us there. And we have, the Hackney Society has a special Christmas offer on its books. So there are 3 books there that are discounted: Hackney, the Portrait of a Community, Hackney, an Uncommon History, and Hackney, Modern, Restored, Forgotten, Ignored. All great books. It's a really good deal for £30. And they will come delivered to you as long as you're in Hackney. So hopefully people will take up that offer. And again, that's something that you can click on the details or go onto the Hackney website, Hackney Society website. And finally, you can join our mailing list, the Hackney Society mailing list, and get notice of all these events and various other things that are going on locally. Again, do that on the Hackney Society website. And of course, we'd love people to join the Hackney Society. So we hope to see you again at the next event on January the 13th. But in the meanwhile, do keep in touch and do join us. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight.
I used to think that this is where I'll raise my children and grow old, but no. time to go. Maybe someday I will see that no matter where I'll be, I will always sing this song with a bitter smile.